Welcome to We Need to Talk About Farming, a new spin-off series from myself, Will Evans, and the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission. There's a lot of noise in farming right now. For many, the future feels uncertain. This series is about having better conversations about the biggest issues facing agriculture. In each episode, we'll take on a topic that's making headlines and dividing social media and WhatsApp groups. We'll go beyond the buzzwords, cut through the cliches, and work out what really matters. In this episode, we're talking about food security. From the war in Ukraine and the Middle East to President Trump's threat of tariffs, global politics feel more volatile than ever. Climate change and extreme weather are making agriculture more risky and disrupting food chains across the planet. How should Britain feed itself in an unstable world? How prepared is the country for shocks to its food supply, and how can we build the resilience we need? I'm joined by Jonty Brunyee and Professor Tim Lang. Jonty runs Conagry Farm, a tenanted organic holding on a National Trust estate in the Cotswolds. Much of his work involves helping farmers collaborate and learn and encouraging new entrants. He was a founder of the Emergent Generation. Say that again. He was a founder of the Emergent Generation Youth Network, North East Cotswolds Farmer Cluster, and the region's Regenerative Agriculture Accelerator Programme. An advisor and consultant, he's a commissioner for the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission. Tim is a world-leading academic and emeritus professor of food policy at City St George's, University of London. After finishing his PhD in the 1970s, he became a hill farmer in Lancashire, sparking an interest in farming and food. Among his dozens of publications, he's the author of Feed in Britain, Our Food Problems and How to Fix Them. Earlier this year, Tim published a major report on the UK's food resilience for the National Preparedness Commission. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
In the
Morning.
last year, food security is national security has become a bit of a political cliche, and it's been talked about by ministers, big businesses, farming leaders. You really do hear that phrase everywhere. Tim, you've worked for years trying to bring this issue up the agenda. Why is it broken through now, and what do you think they mean by this phrase?
Well, let's take those two questions separately. Why is it broken through now? It's sort of easier to answer. It's the geopolitics. Essentially, the world has become more unstable. The post 1970s neoliberal consensus that markets can resolve all problems, that consumer choice drives everything, and that the role of government is to stand back and just facilitate market relations. That's all quietly collapsing. You've got an American president who, at whim, announced on his own private social media, just doubles a tax to the biggest and the second biggest or the biggest population in the world, India, and you've got a war going on between Russia, a major oil and fossil fuel economy, but a declining power, has annexed parts of a country which feeds contributes to feeding 55, that's a quarter of all the countries on the earth. You know, the world food system of the last 50 years is looking much shakier. And when Russia invaded Ukraine for the second time in 2022, oil and fertilizer dependencies of little, strong, independent Britain suddenly were shown to be entirely dependent on things out of any farmer's control. And so the geopolitics is really the answer, Will.
Okay.
Um, the what is meant by food security? Well, I've written one of the most highly cited articles I've ever written. It basically says it can mean all things to all people. It's a term that derived actually again from that post Second World War, post Second World War experience. the post-Second World War reconstruction was about subsidizing farmers and encouraging them to grow more, and then the price would come down and everyone would be happy.
Mm.
But by within 30 years, that was being exposed as not quite the answer. The beginning of what now we know is an obesity pandemic. And so the definition of food security has changed to incorporate a decent diet, not just enough calories, but a decent diet, a sustainable diet, one which isn't just at the national level. We could feed the world amply at the moment, by the
Yeah.
way, but yet there's mass starvation in parts of the world. Uh, and what we must say, final point, we must make sure that we don't just say food security is self-sufficiency. So Britain providing all its own food equals food security, because it could be maldistributed. There may be
Yeah.
plenty of food grown in Britain to feed Britain, but it's maldistributed and therefore it's not food secure. So we have to have a bit of pompous gits like me, actually, just reminding us this is a complex issue. So when we in farming, and I was an ex-farmer, when we say, look, we should be growing more, we've got to say, for whom?
Mm.
How? What's the distribution? Where's the power in it? How confident are people in being able to feed themselves? So security is a psychological issue in food as much as a nutritional or production issue.
Yes, it is a complicated issue, Jonty, isn't it? And how do you think, as a fellow farmer, how do you think food security is understood within the farming community?
I think when you boil it down, I think most farmers do see the main metric of food security as yield. And that's in our bones, it's in our blood, isn't it? It's the thing we can see out of our window
Hmm.
is what's the harvest looking like? How many cows have I got? How big is that cow? What's the daily live weight gain? How many litres of milk can I produce? So I think the main metric for farmers will always be yield, an area of land in production. And we feel threatened by both of those right now, that maybe we're taking our eye off yield and we're taking land out of production. So that feels slightly threatening to us as an industry, and I do understand why.
Hmm.
But as Tim has alluded, of course, it's much more complex than that. At farm level, as an agroecological farmer, I know that food security is about healthy, thriving ecosystems on my farm. It's about my soil. Can it produce food in the future with lower inputs or no inputs? It's about skills and confidence and people. It's about diversity of ecosystem and crop and enterprise. And it's about nutrient density as well. And we're getting quite excited about that at farm level. So when I started my career as an advisor 30 years ago with FWAG in Lincolnshire, I think we just talked about yield. But I think now we're starting to talk about all of these things in the pub with fellow farmers.
I suppose the main thing, while you're talking, I agree with all of that, Jonty. The main issue that comes out of sort of the big sort of analysis of food security I was trying to draw upon is that I think now in Britain, you farmers and growers have got to stop thinking just about what happens in supply and start thinking for what? Who are you feeding? Because yield just says, okay, I produce more, my storage is bigger, my grain store is overflowing, terrific, I'm doing a great job, I'm feeding Britain. It's not true. You're feeding commodity
Mm.
markets. You're feeding big companies that distort the nutrients in it. And also the hoary old issue, so much grain, if we look at grain, is used to feed animals. So you're basically wasting the nutrients by reducing uh, grain consumption to meat consumption. So part of the security debate is about whom is being fed,
Mm.
not just okay, supply's great, therefore everything's okay.
Yeah.
It's not true. There's a power distribution
Yeah.
system, not least people like me have argued, and I used to be incredibly unpopular with farmers 40 years ago. People like me arguing this, was saying you're just you're being squeezed. Your profits you're put onto a treadmill. You're turned into this machine that produces more for less, and it's being wasted.
Mm.
So it's all of that is not to knock farmers, but to say part of the debate about who are we, where are we as a country, what do we want from our land, what do we want farmers and growers to do, has got to be about for what? What
Mm.
is it? I think you've got, and you put it beautifully, all the ecological arguments. I'll gently say it's about feeding people, actually, as well as that. And the a a lot of the farm organizations are rightly saying, with the big emphasis on farming and sustainability, they're saying, rightly, what about feeding people? And they're
Mm.
right, actually. But that requires quite a big change in the food system. Uh,
Is it farmers' job to worry about this, Tim? And I just sort of everything.
Good
I
point.
agree with everything you say, but for me, as a tenant farmer, I've just finished harvest late last night. I mean, I'm not complaining. I love my job, but I've got an awful lot to do as well as sort of, try to spend some time with my children over the summer holidays. I'm kind of so focused on running my own business and as Jonty just said, paying the bills. I don't have an awful lot of time to maybe think about the bigger
I
picture, maybe
absolutely
as I should, but
No, I totally get that actually. What you can't resolve everything. How can a farmer or grower resolve the complexity of the food
mm,
system? That is why, whether we like it or not, one is inevitably drawn back into think, well, the role of government is to provide a framework.
mm,
That I think farmers can engage with, but you can't resolve it, you farmers. You can't possibly resolve it. It requires, I think, a rethink about what do we want as a framework. And I think government, even if it doesn't want to do it, ends up having to do it. And if you notice, we had the Dimbleby process under the Johnson sort of rather chaotic government, and it was swept away.
mm,
I take people back. Well, actually, the Labour government, the Blair Brown era, at the end of it, they got faced by the commodity crisis when oil went up, doubled in price in 2007-8, and food prices then went up exactly in the way because food is dependent upon the oil economy. Uh, and to their credit, and to his credit, Gordon Brown, when he took over as Prime Minister, said the first inquiry he asked the Cabinet Office to do, the strategy unit, was say, what are we going to do about food? And they went through a process that ended up saying, look, we've got to address climate change, we've got to address consumer issues, all the things we've been talking about. And they set up a strategy called the Food 2030 strategy, and it was in place, signed off by the Prime Minister, unlike Henry Dimbleby. Johnson rejected it, just dismissed it as nanny statism, which was stupid. Uh, but then the incoming government in 2010 just got rid of it as well.
mm,
So people like me are saying we've got a third opportunity now. The present government, whatever one thinks about it, has said we've got to have a food strategy. And a process is underway. The Food Farming Countryside Commission is engaging with that. It's great. It's part of it. Uh, we must get it right this third time. And I think it must be in law. So you don't have to think about it, Will. You've got a new set of guidelines saying, dear farming, dear growers, dear land workers, this is what we want from it. We want you not to be food or environment, but food and environment, and
mm,
weave them together with public health, with the public need. So I think the debate does involve you, Will, at that level. Think, what can we
mm,
do? If you're up on the top of the Pennines, you can't grow mangoes or bananas. You're not going to resolve Britain's favorite fruit, bananas, but you can grow other things and you
mm,
can diversify and you can have less inputs. But on grade one, grade two land, you could grow different crops and there could be a more regional food economy. And that debate, I think farmers could engage with, and you would know that in Wrexham, you
mm,
would know that in the Cotswolds, Jonty. So that's where I and others like me are pointing gently. We need a national framework, but it also needs to get dressed down to the local level and to the regional level. And you're seeing some of that politics emerging in Wales at the moment,
yeah, you are.
really, and in
Yeah,
Scotland, but
yeah.
not in England. It's always England's the problem.
Jonty, I am often, when I go to farming meetings or conferences or even to livestock market, I'm 47 and I'm often the youngest person in the room by some distance. And thinking, that kind of statistic that's the average age of the farmer is whatever it is, 59 or 60 is always trotted out at farming conferences, isn't it? That's a problem, isn't it? It's a big area of concern, I think, for food security. Is that something that you're seeing as well, or do you see more young people going in?
Um, yeah, there are lots of young people wanting to do great things, and I think we need to stay positive here. Yeah, mum and dad, uncle, auntie might be the people who are signing the check still and are
Yeah.
still on the grant applications and are still the business leaders, but there's lots of great young people. And that's
I
why
agree.
I set up Emergent Generation, was to try and bring great agroecological farmers and growers together with land agents and advisors and
Hmm.
policymakers into that space because we need everybody within this food system. So I've got hope about young farmers actually. They've got some enterprising spirit, they've got some good skills. A lot of them will still work hard and they're inquisitive. And as you know, Will, if you get down to Groundswell and festivals like that, there's lots of great young
There
people.
is.
So I think there's hope actually, but we need a business and a sector that's attractive and rewards them for what they're going to let themselves in for. That's my biggest worry.
Hmm.
Are they going to get a viable business and a structure and policy that will work for them?
Hmm.
Otherwise, we're setting them up to fail.
For sure.
I agree with that. When I was doing my 2 years of inquiry for the Just in Case report for the National Preparedness Commission, I was actually really impressed. I spent quite a lot of time in Wales by the new generation of horticulturalists and small farmers. And that, of course, Wales is associated with because of the land holdings and all of that. And the access to land is easier there.
Hmm.
But I was impressed that the Welsh government had put in some framework thinking to accelerate that and to support it. If you can make a viable living from a small holding, you can build a house. Just think about that in the Cotswolds. Holy Moses. Exactly. Dear listeners, you can't see Jonty's the thought that celebrity rock stars owning large amounts of land in the Cotswolds should have young people building a house.
Mm.
Um, so, I mean, that's an example. I think I totally agree with you. There's lots of young people really wanting to get in and getting in, actually, which is why I don't know if you both agree. I think horticulture and plant growing is so important because it's so productive, much more productive than conventional farming, produces more nutrients per acre, per
Yeah.
hectare.
I'd agree. The
So,
best farming decision I ever made was a market garden here at the farm.
oh, how fantastic.
2.5 acre no dig garden. It's a joint venture with a young grower, and there's
Oh,
now
I'd love to
four
come and see
people
it.
working in that garden, turning over more than the rest of the farm is put together,
Correct.
feeding
A
50 families
well-run
locally.
horticultural enterprise. And I think that's something, I mean, started talking with some mayors. I think this is something we really must press ahead. Whether government does it or not, we must really try to encourage that sector. And again, in Wales, I've seen illustrations of that, and there's great hope in that.
But the big challenge there is, of course, where do people live? It's
Exactly.
not brilliantly paid, and who can afford a house in the Cotswolds and
Correct.
to work on a market garden? And it's the same across much of the UK.
So again, we're back to the theme of do we need governments to take this seriously? The
Mm.
problems of the rural areas aren't just rural. They're
Yeah.
partly industrial. They're partly about creating jobs in other ways. And you
Mm.
see
Yeah.
that in your area, Will, in Wrexham, northeast Wales,
Yeah.
Flintshire.
Yes.
It's really interesting
Mm.
experiments going on. You're one of the only areas of Britain which has
Hmm.
retained its horticultural college legacy of post-Second World War. And that requires the education facilities and support to encourage would-be growers to get skilled to become growers. So all of that optimism you both have that I share with you requires an infrastructure.
Yeah.
For
That
sure.
just on one more thing, on, if I may, on infrastructure, abattoirs.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, we're going to have probably more animals in the landscape as we, do more regenerative agriculture, more cover crops, more grazing, landscape recovery, and we're not going to have the abattoirs to process them. So there's a big challenge there. And that's not only for obviously killing and cutting, but enterprise and how do we add value at local level and keep stuff local too.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. Well, if my friend Christopher Price is listening from Chief Executive of the Rare Breed at Survival Trust, he will be punching the air for you mentioning that, Jonty.
Yeah,
Um,
you're right.
okay. Another word that's become a bit of a buzzword is resilience, Jonty. That ability to bounce back after a shock, whether it's global pandemic or a flood, something that is affecting me more and more on my farm, or looking big at cyber attack. What does it mean for a farming business to be resilient, Jonty? Is it just about finances and profitability? Is it sort of mixed enterprises? How resilient is UK farming as a whole?
Mm. First one, what does it mean to me? Yes, that bounce back ability. And how do you get that? And for me, it's about diversity. Diversity across the whole business. So diversity of crop, of stock, of genetics, of biodiversity, of people, of enterprise, of mindset. If you've got that within a business, you've got scope to flex and adapt and to bounce back and to do things differently. And, wheat, I don't think many people are going to make profit out of wheat this year, but beef and lamb are doing okay, and milk is
Mm,
actually doing okay. So having multiple enterprises, corn and horn, etc. Um, for me, about resilience is also shorter supply chains and selling locally and adding your value and knowing your community and your customer. Not everyone can do that. I'm a small farmer. I'm only 73 hectares. I can do that, and I think that gives me some resilience. Medium scale, larger farmers obviously have to use commodity markets. Again, resilience for me is about reducing reliance on external inputs, whether it's fertilizer, fossil fuel, sprays, steel and concrete, because they're expensive and we can't control those prices so well. So trying to move to a lower input system. I'm a pasture for life farmer. I don't feed any soya, no grains. The sun shines, it rains sometimes. Grass grows. That's how simple farming can be.
mm.
And most of the time, that can be a very resilient system. I'll say most of the time and leave it there.
Yeah. And Tim, are uh, British farmers and the wider food chain aware of and prepared for these kind of shocks we've seen over the last decade? I mean, what would happen if a cyber attack shut down one of the big retailers? I mean, it's not. It sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie, but it's not, is it? What would happen in that instance?
Well, that's what I got asked to look at, partly by the National Preparedness Commission for what became my just in case report,
Yeah.
because my title came from looking at the logistics industry in particular, which is not the architect, but is the lifeblood that gets the supply chains working. It literally moves the food. It moves the fertilizers into the farmers. It moves the food up and down the chain and across, and consumers then get it and they move it again. And in a sense, what I was trying to do was saying, where are the potential shocks to the food system? We began this discussion with the
Mhm.
geopolitics, and that actually is fundamentally important. And Jonty's very eloquently put, the principle of diversity applies to that as well. It's much more important not to be reliant. I mean, the classic example is the food manufacturing industry has been entirely dependent, I wrote this up in my report, upon one supply of CO2.
Mm.
This is stupid,
Mm.
absolutely stupid. Um, the supply chains of all the food in Britain uh, that is bought at shops, so that's not the hospitality sector, goes through 121 hubs, what used to be called regional distribution centres, but now DC distribution centres. So Tesco, which is about a third of all food, has precisely 20. That's fragile.
Mm.
That's actually an at risk. If you wanted to cyber attack, you've only got 20 you've got to hit. You can only hit 5, and you're going to knock out a vast amount of food supply. when this was sort of last looked at by the British state 20 years ago, it said, oh, it's all fine. If one RDC is knocked out, there are others can feed them. Then, my report just said, hold on a minute. And it wasn't, my report was based upon interviewing people in the industries, by the way. So it wasn't just what does Tim Lang think? I went out and spoke to the industries and spoke to people up and down the food systems. And they all said, this is fragile. Whatever we say in public, it's fragile.
Mm.
It can be knocked out. Back to this key argument I'm trying to communicate, which is resilience and security aren't just about supply. They're about demand. They're about consumption. They're about the public. We've got to involve the public in that. We had to do that in World War II in campaigns to stop people wasting food. Waste is built into the
Yeah.
modern food at a catastrophic level. Depending which sort of estimates you do, 25% or 30% is wasted. Some's wasted by being screened out at the farm level, and huge amounts are wasted by consumers. Well, that's a distorted culture. That's not a resilient culture. That's one that's just living on borrowed time, actually. So resilience, the point of my report, and it is a look at what I called civil food resilience. Is the British public prepared for shocks? No. Are farmers prepared for shocks? No. Is the food economy prepared for shocks? No. But there's a little bit been going on, all at the single sector, single company level. The British Standards Institute and DEFRA issued guidance 17 years ago and is quietly updated, called in a PAS 96, a publicly available specification. So it's sort of unofficial guidelines of what you can do, but it's just for the company for it to manage its reputational risk, to stop its supply chain being hit. But all the people I interviewed in industry said, actually, you can't possibly do that on your own. It's got to be corporate wide. It's got to be structure. It's got to be systems wide. And that's a theme I don't think we're addressing the politics of, Will, to be honest. And it's a political issue. Government has to get a grip of this.
Could I throw in the word capacity here as well?
Yeah,
To be
absolutely.
resilient, we need capacity. And at farm level, what does that mean? I think we need capacity of time. We can't work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week.
No.
Some time off and away from the farm to think and to energize and just to recover. But also we need time to spend on the business, as in strategizing, marketing, telling stories,
Thinking.
improving things, not just working outside and doing the day job. We need capacity of people. And I got this really brought home to me this year. This farm was let to me as a part-time farm, half of me, and I was expected to go off farm half the week. Now, if something happened to me, who's gonna feed the cows? Who's going to lamb the sheep? There's now 6 of us working here. Most of us part-time, but it means when one of us is sick, and we've had key members of staff off ill this year, it means we could cover and backfill, and the business continued. So having capacity of people and skills and mindset there.
It's well said, Jonty.
But also money. We need a little bit in the bank for cash flow. And when things go wrong and when years are bad. And where did that little bit come from? It came from Common Agricultural Policy. It came from CAP and subsidy and agri-environment. Now, dare we go there in this conversation? Because I think we're at a cliff edge with that. And if wheat is poor, and if milk, beef, lamb prices start to drop, if input prices go up, and there's no baseline subsidy, and the public money for public goods system doesn't work in the next couple of years, we're doomed. There is no slack in this business anymore.
I think that's really powerfully put, Jonty. And I mean, doesn't matter what I think, but I completely agree. I think that the issue of capacity and skills is something we've tended to devolve to skills councils, as though it's just about nuts and bolts and do you know how to milk a cow and what's a modern cow management system. Capacity is about that latitude. And you see, I mean, I was at Ground Swallows, you were this year. I mean, you're just seeing people enjoying thinking out aloud and talking and listening and having the thoughts. When I was a small farmer, I used to talk with lots of our neighbors and people all over the shop. And you could have people who are used to just talking to themselves, not talking with others. It's actually getting people together.
Mm-hmm.
My granddaughter's just got me to read two accounts by land army girls, actually, in World War II. And what was so interesting was reading about the thinking that went on. Why were they doing this? Why was there suddenly an influx of labor to try and produce more food? In 1939, Britain produced 30% of its food. By the end of 1945, so in 6 years, in war, it doubled production. Uh, well, these things are possible to do, but it requires thinking about the humans in it. It's that human.
Mm.
And my report, sorry to go back to my report, but I put a lot of thinking. It's free to download. Just download it. It's about people. Food is about people. It's about people having the confidence to do things and the room to experiment and to get together with others.
Mm.
And Britain's had a very individualistic approach to farming.
Yeah.
On the continent, there's historically been more cooperation. And I think one of the good things that's happening in British farming at the moment, all over Britain, is that farmers are getting together more. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's terrific, but it does need new structures to come out of it, I think.
So, what are the best ways for Britain as a country to improve its food security and resilience, Tim? If Keir Starmer rang you up today and said, "Right, Tim, you're in charge of this now. We're going
Well,
to do
I
what
only had
we're going to
one.
do whatever you say." Where should we be investing our time and resources first? What's the first thing we should
I've
do?
only had one conversation with Keir Starmer when he was in opposition, not when he was shadow leader, but before that. And it was a very nice conversation for all of 5 minutes. And I got it that he was interested
Hmm.
in food. He was the lawyer for the McDonald's case. And so he's got a bit of knowledge about mass consumption issues and the structure and the power there. But what would I do? Well, with colleagues, because like the tone of what we're saying, I don't like doing things particularly on my own. I like to see if we can get a common position together with others, other academics. We produced a paper 3 years ago for things that could be done without much money, uh, and frameworks is one of them. So there is a shopping list of people like me. It's new structures we could do with the Council of Food Policy. We could do with uh, uh, a goal of increasing production, not at all costs. We should get a grip of exactly what we want from the food system. We need to ensure that that arrives out of the food strategy process that's beginning now. But I think that's got to include the public, not just supply, but also building in the needs of the public, not in a patrician way. But specifically, what would I do? I'd focus on horticulture, very definitely. Uh, uh, secondly, I try to increase the capacity and the thinking of, in England, the regions, possibly around the metro mayors. I would encourage them to do that. Talking with East Midlands recently and talking Greater Manchester and Birmingham, there's some very interesting thinking and awareness of the need to rebuild urban-rural connections. I'd like to see work in that area. In my report, I looked at France and what it's done for different reasons, and now it's benefiting the rebuilding of connections between urban and rural at local level, rebuilding food economies. Can be slow, but I'd get going on that for the reasons we were talking about earlier, 10 minutes ago, about jobs and the rural economy, building jobs and gateways and entry points for young people. I would probably the biggest ask I've got, Will, is that this must be in legislation. After World War II, whoever had won that election in 1945, there would have had to be a rethink. There was an agreement, like there was an agreement on education with the 1944 Education Act. The 1947 Agriculture Act said we must produce more. We've got to create an infrastructure that allows that and supports farming to do that. We need something of that stature now. It must be in legislation, or we're wasting our time. Not telling farmers what to do or telling consumers what to do, but shaping it so that we can get the public good out of it. We're tending to think the public good is just about ecology. It's not. It is about ecology, but it's also about feeding people well. I walk around Britain and we're fat. We're unhealthy. The gap between the rich and poor is greater than it was in Victorian times. In Victorian times, the rich died early. Now the rich live longer. This is a shocking state of affairs because of how we live, and food is a major driver of that. And we can't bury our heads in the sand about that anymore.
Jonty, what would you if you were a special advisor to Tim on this? If Keir Starmer rang you up as well, what would your ask be from
Well,
government?
I've just scribbled down a 7-point plan.
A 7 point plan, brilliant.
Number one, put agroecology at the heart of what we do. The 13 principles of agroecology, because it goes beyond the farm gate and soil health and
Yeah.
diversity, and it includes people and diets and governance and fairness, and we need that within the food system. And I'd make sure that the regenerative transition, which I'm a big fan of, is a deep transition. Cover crops and min-till aren't going to save us. We need to go much deeper down the regenerative spectrum, and that's at landscape scale. It involves communities, and it's net regeneration, not just a field or two for a while and then throughout the rotation. So a deep transition. Number two would be make sure the public money for public goods system is well funded and works, because we can't do this without that and a green finance system that works too. Private sector has to pull its weight here. Land use framework. Let's get behind it. There's only so much land. It's complex. We need a strategic approach to what we're going to use that land for. I know that feels threatening sometimes as a farmer, but we need to have those honest discussions.
Mhm.
Number four, commerciality. We often forget the word profit and being commercial. Retailers, most people will still shop at supermarkets in the next 20 years. So we need to we need to work with retailers and be commercial and commercialize to a degree agroecology, regenerative output, nutritional dense food, etc. Because that's how most of it will still get to consumers. Five, agree with Tim, horticulture. I think there should be a shift a little bit from agriculture to horticulture. We need a horticulture strategy. And I don't know where that got to. I think that's still on the shelf and hasn't got very far. Six, collaboration. I would say that, wouldn't I? Cluster groups coming together, taking a bit of local power back, working things out at local and landscape level, engaging with our consumers, developing our supply chains, doing the green finance thing at landscape scale. And here at the Northeast Cotswold cluster, we're doing that, and it's proving very, very powerful. And the final one, and again, I would say this one, wouldn't I? Invest in young people. They are the future. They have got the skills and energy and the marketing nous. And yeah, we need them. And we need to support those and bring them through and give them a business to inherit. I've not even mentioned IHT. I don't know how I didn't do
Well, let's not go there.
that.
That's a whole other podcast.
Isn't it, James?
All right. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you both for that answer. That was very, very comprehensive. All right. I think we're getting close to the end. We're running out of time. But before we go, just want to ask you both, what's one thing you've read, watched, or listened to recently that you'd recommend to listeners who are further interested in this topic? I mean, Tim, you can talk about your report again if you want to.
Oh, no, no. I really would like to say, please download my report. Just put my name, Tim Lang, just in case, and it'll come up. And there's a short version that's very easy, and it's a 7-point plan, actually, Jonty. But there's a very long report with all the interviews and things, and they're all anonymous. But please do look at it. It's been written for you, and it's actually being downloaded a lot. But what I mean, I thought you would ask us this, and I can't think of one book that I would really recommend people read. But actually, I'll reach for it. The book I'm reading another one at the moment by Barraclough, but this is by Rachel Knappert, called "A Pullet on the Midden," published by Michael Joseph in just after the Second World War, and it's by this young woman who went to work as a land army girl in southwest Lancashire, sort of the Ormskirk Moss, as we'd call it. And it's just an amazing description of the people, you know. But you go to some very big farms today, and there's two people working there. Yeah, and this is what we'd now consider a small farm. You described yourself as a small farm of 75 hectares, Jonty. I mean, that's enormous in world scale, enormous. And yet we know exactly what you mean by it being a
Mm.
small farm. And if you think about when people were more important in food production, you have to go back 60, 70 years. And I know when I went farming in 1973, my neighbors, our neighbors were, riveted that young people wanted to come and farm in this way and were around us like bees, like a honeypot, because they thought it was wonderful. But what is it we want from the land, it seems to me, is the question of this podcast.
Mm.
What is it we want from the people who manage the land? And I say feed them, feed people. It's about
Mm.
feeding people, not feeding corporations. Sometimes they're necessary, supermarkets are necessary, etc. But it's almost like the moment we're about to feed people, another sector comes along and says, I'll have a bit of slice of that action. And at the moment, it's delivery companies taking
Mm.
more value added out of it. I'm afraid.
I've written down a pull it on the minute. I'm definitely going to read that.
It's terrific.
It sounds
It's so
right up
amusing.
my street. I'd
It's
love that.
so amusing. You get it.
Mm.
My granddaughter got it, I think, for £1, second hand.
Oh, I'm definitely
It's
going to track that
really,
down.
really whimsical. It made me laugh out loud at times,
Sounds
but it
fantastic.
was lovely about the people.
Mm.
That
Mm.
was what was so, it's very,
Mm.
very, very warming.
What about you, Jonty? Is there anything you'd recommend?
So I'm going to cheat and have two. And Tim mentioned war, and looking back, I'm going for Spike Milligan's War
Oh, yeah.
Games, the first book I ever read as a kid. Right, and I'm choosing this
Fantastic.
one. I'm choosing these. I think there's seven, and I'm choosing them to remind us how bad it can get,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're not far from that.
Mm.
Substitute any right-wing leader if you wish there,
Hmm.
but also reminding us to have a sense of humour and to keep smiling through this, otherwise we are doomed, and to have that humility. So that's why that one. And also to remind me to get away from farming. I don't read farming books very regularly. The last thing I want to do after 14 hours of talking and working in farming is read about
Yeah.
farming. So I generally don't read farming books anymore. But the last one that I did, well, not the last one, but my favourite and the proper one, Dirt to Soil, Gabe Brown,
Okay,
for those
Brown.
farmers out there that want an easy access to regenerative thinking and agroecology, grab that one. It's an easy read. It's very positive.
It is.
Yeah, I love Gabe. And yeah, if I had 2 meters of deep dark soil, and if I had the frost that Gabe worked, I think it would work on my farm. But it's all about context. So read this and think about how it could work for you on your farm and your soil.
Okay. Brilliant recommendations. That's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much, very much to you both, because it's a huge topic. I'm sure we could have talked about it all day, but no, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you to our guests, Jonty, Professor. No, sorry, I'm going to start all that again. That's all we have time for today, but thank you very much to our guests, Jonty Brunyee and Professor Tim Lang. That really has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you for listening, and look out for the next episode of We Need to Talk About Farming coming very soon.